Hey everyone, it's PL Street here. It's Friday afternoon slash evening, evening where I am in Canada. So, hello, wherever you are, in whatever part of the world you are, and whatever time it is there. I just thought I would do a, I call it a review, but also I'm calling it a not review because I just don't feel adequate to. I mean, I know giving your thoughts on a book, technically, in a way, is a review. It's just this book is different from any other book I've ever read in that I do feel, um, I do feel disingenuous saying that this is a review because in 95% of the books I read, I feel that I comprehend the vast majority of the book. And there were moments in this book where I was lost, but that doesn't detract from the brilliance of this book. And it is this will probably the first time that a book that I just made those comments about, a book that I struggled with understanding at many points in this book, will probably be my top 10 books of the year. So, Black Leopard, Red Wolf. It's so hard to put together cogent thoughts about it. Let's start with the tagline. The child is dead, and that's all you need to know. That's on the tagline of the back cover synopsis of the book. Now, in many ways, this is it's epic fantasy. It was sold and marketed as an epic fantasy, and the author took a lot of inspiration from Tolkien. There's a lot of Tolkienisms in this book. Clearly, you can see there's homage to Tolkien, but at the same time, this is very unique. This is not Western. This is African style storytelling, and it runs in a lot of ways counterintuitive to Western style storytelling. In that, especially to simplify it, in terms of African style storytelling, a lot of that brand of storytelling is rooted in a trickster. This, just think of like a Loki type character that you can't really trust. You're not really sure if to tell them the truth. They're a prankster. They like to mess with the truth. They like to mess with your understanding, comprehension of the truth. And they're not necessarily to be believed. So this um, this fantasy, this literary fantasy, is based on a lot of ancient African myths. And as I mentioned, in terms of it, it runs almost counterintuitive to Western style storytelling. This isn't some narrative of heroism. This isn't heroic narrative. It subverts a lot of the high fantasy tropes you find in Western type fantasy. Um, I should probably, and then forgive my rambling on this. My thoughts on this book is probably going to sound as disjointed as the book itself, but I'm just spitting this out there, because I've been sitting on this for a while, wanting to articulate my thoughts, and now I feel I'm finding the headspace to somewhat do that. But in any case, this is brilliant. And that's when I said this could wind up and probably will wind up in my top books of the year. The writer is indisputably a genius. Despite for me the murkiness of reading this book, but this is one of those books where the saying "trust the author." You may not know what direction you're headed in, and for so much of the book you will feel lost. But just trust the author. Everything has a purpose, and if you don't pick up on everything, because I doubt you will, even if you're used to reading this type of storytelling told in this more African traditional style, it's okay. Just embrace it. It will help develop you, as a reader. So much of that storytelling style, and this isn't something that's unfamiliar. I'm sure many of you have read stories like that before. There's stories within stories, right? So it's like a nesting doll in that element, and not everything is going to be germane to the main plot. And when I say plot, I use the term loosely, but just write it out. It's going to dovetail into the main storyline at some point later, or potentially. I have not read the second book. This is a series. This is the first book in a series. So My understanding is that second book, which I do plan to read, some of those storylines will fall right into that second book and potentially later books, I would assume. So the author himself, his background is he's Jamaican, so Caribbean islands, and of course, as you know, most Caribbean people are descended from Africa, and he put a lot of deep research into African lore. Um, this book, I talked about the trickster. So essentially, with this book, there's a character that tells a story in different parts, and they tell essentially their version of the truth, or perhaps what they know of the truth, or what they want you to believe of the truth. And perhaps this may be a case, as in George R. R. Martin books, that it could be that the hero is a villain on the other side. We're not quite sure. The hero presents as having some very unlikable traits, but this vein of morality, but that's very much buried. It's not up. It's very much far below the surface. I can say about this book as well, and again, I apologize. My thoughts are rambling here, and I just want to say a big shout out to Timothy Wolf. Hey, Timothy, the wonderful Timothy Wolf, great author. I'll be reading Timothy's book soon, so I can't wait for that. Thanks for stopping by, Timothy. Just one of these spontaneous, ad hoc reviews. But yeah, so with this book, what was I saying? I apologize. Yeah, so think about R. Scott Baker. I've only read one book by Baker, but like Baker and his Second Apocalypse trilogy, I think this is a book you might not necessarily enjoy. And there's times when I did enjoy it, but it was still a book really well worth reading. It's very well written. It has purpose. And the one word I would describe for this book is, just in terms of my own reading, original. It has this, like I said, my thoughts are very disjointed and confusing, I think, and that's how you feel when you read this book. It's told from this almost like a fever dream type narrative. There's flashbacks. You'll be constantly challenged, like, what's the character talking about? He's talking about this period of time. He's talking about this thing that happened. Was it something else? You really have to slow down, and it takes a while, I think, to really connect with this book. And I know that people say that a lot of readers will say, if I have to get through a third or 2/3 of a book to actually start comprehending, I'm out. And I totally get that. I totally respect that. But I will say that if you push through, I really think you'll be rewarded. I really honestly think you'll be rewarded. It is a book that it is. Again, I'm struggling for words here. I'm struggling for to encapsulate what this book is really about and how good it is. And I'm not doing a great job, but it is, trust me. And Timothy says, I'm fascinated by this book, but the subject matter is really brutal from what I've heard. It is, and I will get to that, Timothy. It is brutal. So essentially, this book is going to challenge you emotionally, psychologically, mentally, and I think it's up to the reader to decide whether or not it's a bad thing. And I think yourself as a reader, the kind of books that are just, nope, can't do it for whatever reasons. It's triggering, essentially. But, for me, it was a worthwhile read. So, okay, I'm going to try and go back and talk about the book itself. So the book essentially is the main character has been captured and is being interrogated. And we don't know why he's being interrogated. We don't know why he was caught initially. But while he's being interrogated, he tells the interrogator, the person who's questioning him, and called the Inquisitor, he basically presents 3 stories to him. And the first story is about Tracker and his background and how his magical ability to track people works. Essentially, his nose. He has a nose, as he says. And you find out the origins of the mission. That's the central part of this book. And then the second part tells you of his backstory and how his coming of age. He was raised by a man he thought was his father and his mother. You get to know about all his issues. And the third story is how he is employed to find a young boy. And although he normally works on his own, he accepts the companionship and co-employment along with these other characters. And these characters, are, like Tracker himself, are very morally gray. And so much of the book, Tracker himself is wondering, why do I care about finding this boy? Is it really important? Is it worth whatever they're going to pay me? There's something more going on. People are lying to me. The reason why they want to find this boy doesn't match up. It doesn't match up to what I'm being told. And all of these companions seem to have their own agendas. You can't really trust anybody. Tracker feels like essentially a pawn. It's this surreal adventure in this dreamscape that they go on to track this lost child. And it's, Tracker himself, he's a fighter, he's a killer, he's ruthless, he's violent. And, during this adventure, they're attacked by all these weird creatures. They have mortal enemies, and people are put in their way who are, deliberately trying to stop them from finding this boy, or perhaps they're trying to find the boy for their own reasons. And it's so much of it is a puzzle to figure all that out. This book, it deserves a thesis. I'm sure there's been great theses, graduate theses written on this book. I would love to read them. People a lot smarter than me who can really interpret this book well. But again, I go back that this was marketed as basically an African Game of Thrones, and I don't really agree with that. I'm a huge George R. R. Martin fan, and that's not denigrating this book. I'm just saying, it was marketed, and I get why books are marketed a certain way, but you don't find those epic, huge, plot threads with multiple POVs and all these plot lines intersecting. There was that, but not on the level of A Song of Ice and Fire. Sorry, I was at Game of Thrones. I'm specifically the colloquial term. I know a lot of people for the TV show. I do just A Song of Ice and Fire. It doesn't match up to Song of Ice and Fire, especially with the POVs. It's really driven by one character and one character's plot line. And again, this character, because let's talk about characterization. You know that characterization is a big part of a book for me. The character is not likable. So I'm warning you. I was on with Philip Chase. Philip Chase came on. I was honored to have the wonderful Philip Chase, Dear Dr. Fancy, come on 6 Elemental interviews recently. And we share the same view, and he said it far more articulately than I am, that he doesn't have to necessarily enjoy a book to think it's a great book. And I mentioned at the beginning that there's times that's how I felt about this book, and compared it to R. Scott Baker in a great book, great author, that you don't necessarily enjoy. So in any case, again, I am rambling, and forgive me. So Tracker is this character. He's snarky, he's trifling in a lot of ways, he's mean-spirited in a lot of ways, but he does have this moral compass. Part of the book is about his essentially a sexual awakening and how he comes into find his own in terms of sexuality. He's queer, he's a gay Black man essentially, and homophobia in society, it's really important in terms of a theme. It's a coming of age. Tracker leaves home to become this tracker, and with his nose he can find anybody essentially till they die. And he's very his skills as a tracker are valued by others, and he's almost he's like a private detective. He does a lot of, he uses his nose to find, philandering spouses and, a lot of kind of more what would seem like petty, stuff. But he does take on more important missions as well. But when it comes to the characters, again, none of them are really likable. That's how at least I found. A lot of them are vicious. They are petty. They're Machiavellian. They always have another agenda. They are not not likable. I'm repeating myself here, but they're not likable. So be prepared for that. If you want characters, if you're looking for characters that are really likable, it's few and far between that you're going to find in this book, including the main character, and you're in his head. So for someone like me who writes an unlikable main character and you're in his head, I can handle that part quite well. But for some people, not for them. Totally respect that. So just be warned. And there's many things I have to warn you about this book. And we'll get back to what Timothy raised about the themes earlier. So this book has a lot of, well, let me quickly talk about the plot. The plot's nebulous, to put it nicely. Similar to Joe Abercrombie, Joe Abercrombie is famous for writing amazing books that people love, but not much of a plot. This, I would have to agree, is very similar. And in the hyper stylized way it's written, again, you add that to unlikable main character, and if you want a book that's plot driven, that's gonna be another negative. But I'm not trying to accentuate the negatives. I'm just saying these are things that you have to look out for. You might find it frustrating that way, but at the same time, the prose. Let's talk about something positive. The prose is beautiful. It's poetic. It's epic. It's the book is written cinematically, but it is dark as all you know what. It is dark, man. It is difficult and it is dark. It is explicit. It is graphic. There is, just trigger warnings here. There is some really dark stuff in this book. And it's not just because there are dark scenes and elements. It's written in a dark fashion. I won't say it's nihilistic or hopeless. It's just dark, man. And let's just talk about some of the themes and stuff. Oh, I should quickly mention the humor is very crude and bawdy, and that's another thing. If you don't like that is potentially another reason why you might want to avoid the book. Themes: rape, homophobia, female genital mutilation, torture, slavery, heavily misogyny, child abuse, some really shocking sexual violence, frankly, and very disturbing. I mean, there's times it seems that the misogyny, the sexism, the homophobia, it's really woven to the narrative. I think, I tried to do some research on the author and keeping his own personal perspective and things that he probably wanted to write in this book. And I'm just guessing. I don't know. I don't think it was for shock value. Trackers is unlikable and it seems casually horrible sometimes, but I don't think it's written in to be, the shock value. I think a lot of it may have been the author. And I'm saying this again first as a cis hetero male, black male, that it's almost a commentary on some in terms of African traditional cultures and views. Unfortunately, like many cultures, there's definitely an undercurrent of homophobia, and a feminism is denigrated. The perception of being a feminist is denigrated. If there's a lot of themes about basically essentially saying that for men and women, they need to be circumcised to remove the other gender from them to make them powerful and strong. So you have to cut out the female parts from a man to make him more of a man, and the male parts for a woman to make her more of a woman. That's essentially there's constant reference to circumcision and female genital mutilation, and it's tough to read. And that's one of the themes here. It's hard to swallow some of it. There's also shadism. So there's a worshiping of skin tone. Obviously, when I talk about shadism, worshiping of the lighter skin tone and the the further closer to white you are on the spectrum is the better you are in terms of that. There's there's a I have to say this, when I talk about humor and blindness, there's this sensory thing. Trackers knows. So I mentioned at the beginning of the about the book that sorry, the beginning of the review, that the book knows the humor body, but Tracker has a nose and he smells things. But a lot of time that manifests in the way it's written. About it's written, and he's talking about it's very scent oriented. He's talking about perspiration, body odor from genitals and orifices, essentially, and everything seems to smell like feces and semen. I'm just telling you straight up. And Timothy put up. Yeah, I may skip this one. I totally get it. And I'm probably doing a horrible job, as I was worried I would be, at describing this book, and I haven't exactly spent it on the virtues yet to the degree that I want to. There are a lot of virtues. I talked about the writing; it is incredible, and it is original. And I think the African storytelling, for those who are not used to it, I think it's a great mental exercise to get used to. I think it can be really beautiful when you dig into it. The fight scenes are amazing. The fight scenes are incredible. They are gripping. They are scary. These, and a lot is because they have these magical beasts. I don't even want to spoil the types of beasts that are in this story. A lot of them based on African mythology. There's shapeshifters. There's really, really scary, like cosmic horror type stuff, witches, sea creatures. Again, I don't want to spoil the monsters, but the monsters are badass in this book, right? And for a lot of readers who are not used to it, these creatures, especially from African myth, they're not necessarily inherently bad. They exist. They're complex. Some of them are bad. Don't get me wrong. Some of them are evil, but some of them simply exist and are misunderstood. And that, again, the fight scenes with these creatures especially were just wow. He writes a great fight scene, so that's very much a positive. The ending was a positive. It's shocking. It's very layered contextually. It's really well done. It's a difficult book, again, to read, and it's even more difficult to review. And again, give you some cogent thoughts and encourage you why you'd want to read this book. And perhaps, again, I have not done a great job at expanding the virtues of this book, right? This book has a lot of virtues, and I should really be giving more an expansive view of the virtues of this book. But there are some real positives. The prose, once you get used to it, it is just, again, it fits the bizarre, surreal landscape. It just sucks you into this world, this rich African-inspired world, this shadow Africa filled with these gleaming cities and sparkling rivers and these jungles, and it's just it's miraculous for that stuff. And I think, yes, I know it doesn't necessarily mean what like you're giving something a lot of credence because. Sorry, you're not. You and I can sometimes, I think, a lot of us give, I think, credence with the blurbs. You have the Wall Street Journal, Tor Entertainment Weekly, Boston Globe, Esquire, Neil Gaiman. The blurbs on this book, the people who are blurbing this book, the entities that are blurbing this book, Kirkus Reviews, loves this book. Vogue, the New York Times, the Huffington Post. It is very well received in terms of the critical acclaim. And some big literary giants, like I said, have said great things about this book. But of course, that's not necessarily a reason to read it. I'm just saying that I believe a lot of knowledgeable people, in terms of what makes a literary masterpiece, find this to be a masterpiece, frankly. And do I find it to be a masterpiece? In some ways, yes, I honestly do. I probably need to, do a reread. As again, I finished this a while back, and I sat on this review for so long. I will do a reread. I think I'll be a lot more comfortable rereading this book, after reading it the first time. And I think I still think that there's so many positives about this book. Just to read it, just for me to again expand my horizons and read something that was challenging. That mental exercise. Yeah, and and The Sign of a Great Book is a book you think about constantly, and I constantly think about this book and what it means, and I really do want to read the second book. So to some extent, it must have really made a really good impression on me. So I know, and I apologize for the disjointed thoughts. Again, kind of fitting for this book. Those are my thoughts on Black Leopard, Red Wolf. Why should you read this book? Again, I like characters that are morally gray, and a lot of these characters have no sense of duty or honor. All they care about is their sexual escapades. They don't care about finding the boy, or they have some ulterior motive. They seem casual, lackadaisical, even bored. In terms of, there's no sense of urgency to really find a child. Like, a child should be a priority. People should care about children, but some of these characters are just horrible, and some of them are not necessarily outright horrible. Again, they're just morally ambiguous. So that part really fascinated me, and that will always fascinate me about a book. And again, the writing is fantastic. Um, and but it plot it'll take a lot for you to find and hold on and grab the plot in your hand and hold on to it. And again, the themes, the heavy, dark themes, I mentioned them, they will definitely be triggering for, I would arguably, most people. So, for as many reasons as there are to read this book, I hope my review captured that for some people, frankly, stay away. Thanks for listening to my thoughts, my review, not review, on Black Leopard, Red Wolf. I do plan to read the second book. And when I do, I will give you my thoughts on that one as well. So, Timothy Wolf, thanks so much for stopping by and hanging out with the chat. I really appreciate it. Timothy is a great author. I have bought his book recently, and I plan to read it. And I also plan I will have the honor of having Timothy on 6 Elemental interviews in the future. So watch out for that, chat. It's going to be awesome, because Timothy's just an awesome guy. So, everyone, have a good night, evening, afternoon, wherever you are, and we'll see you next time. Take care.